Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the movie Blues. Today on the channel, feeling very blessed to have an awesome guest with me here. If you guys checked out my last video of 15 found footage recommendations, you would remember the movie Ask, which is on there. This is a 2024 found footage movie, which you can now check out on Tubi. And I am pleased to bring in the director, the writer, and the star of Ask, Chris Vander Kay.
What's going on? Thank you so much for having me on the show, man. I was a fan of the show since the second that I saw your you sent me the link for the previous one, the previous found footage. I think it was 15 found footage films. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was super honored when you told me that I was going to be on one as well. So
Appreciate
thank you
it.
so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Chris is also currently having a show on the Found TV app, which will be mentioned quite a few times here, guys. This is an app where you can see some of the best aspiring, burgeoning young filmmakers who are really making a stamp on the found footage scene, which, in my opinion, is currently bigger than ever somehow. I'm not sure how we got here, but it seems like found footage is always swinging back into the cultural lexicon. And if you want to check out some incredible found footage content and a place where I've gotten a lot of my recommendations and seen a lot of great movies, check out the Found app. He's got his show Found Footage Finds right now, which is basically what I do on my YouTube channel as a serialized TV show. It's got history, it's got recommendations from fans, directors, from filmmakers. It's really an impressive culmination of everything that's going on in the found footage community. So I'm real psyched about that as well for you. But I do want to start with the feature film that brought us to this conversation, and that is Ask. Ask, period. Is that right? It's not Ask question mark.
No, well, it's period ask to make it even more confusing. I put the
Period.
period at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is like a fear.com
Yeah.
situation.
Well, I kind of figured if you put punctuation and then the letter A, that means you have to come up first in all alphabetical listings of anything, right?
This
So
is
that was
true.
my,
Another brilliant marketing strategy from Chris Vander Kay. This is good. I like this. So yeah, I want to talk about that. I will say up front, at one point I did, and I'll probably bring this up a few times, not as a brag, but because it's my only comparison point. I did interview Adrian Sofe from Be My Cat, and that was a particularly special experience for me. But the thing with him is that he had already done 600,000 interviews, which I watched mostly all of to prepare to talk to him. In the same way, I've watched as much content as I could binge in the Chris Vander Kay verse. And I am now at a point where I watched your Q&A that you did in the found footage fan group on Facebook. Again, if you guys aren't in that group, it is a 500,000 people strong. It is one of the craziest fan communities I've seen pop up in the horror sphere, in the film sphere in recent years. So go and check it out there. Check out his Q&A because he covers a lot of the bases of both the Found Footage Finds show and Ask as well. And it's for that reason that I want to try to ask you some questions that I didn't see pop up. I know a lot of directors, stars, actors, creatives get asked the same thing 100,000 times in a row. So I'm not going to ask you about your veneers. I promise they look great, but I do not need you to explain all the things that you've so gracefully explained so far in many of your interviews. Before we talk about that, though, I did want to ask you about the premiere that you're having in theaters in Houston. What's the date on that?
June 21st, Saturday, June 21st. It's playing the same weekend as Comic Palooza, actually. Yeah. So it was a fun tie-in. Preston Fossil, who was one of the producers of Ask,
Sure.
he kindly came on board after I had basically started shooting to help me figure out how to shepherd it to the world so that it didn't just end up as a, forgotten movie on YouTube that no one ever found.
Right.
He lives in Texas and he's going out for Comic Palooza, and so just synergy worked out. There was a theater that was looking for something to screen, and so yeah, so Ask, believe it or not, the epic $250 found footage film is going to be playing on the big screen. Yeah.
Awesome, man. And for some reason, I feel like in all the questions I've seen you field about that, I don't know if I missed it or not. Are you actually going to physically be there?
I was originally going to. I am not able to for personal family situation, but I recorded an intro, a special intro that's happening only at the screening there in Houston, so only the people there will see it. And I think what's even more cool, the reason that Preston is going to be there, I mean, aside from the fact that he was involved in the first film, is that we're going to be shooting some footage at the event, some B-roll, some shooting some footage of the movie playing, possibly interacting with some people in the crowd. And the reason we're doing that is because anybody who shows up has the potential to pop up in the sequel film.
Right.
If they show up there, they will end up as potentially in some B-roll that will be in the movie itself.
Now, I won't dare ask anything more about the breakdown plot or future spoilers to be had from Ask 2, but I will say that if you are filming B roll at a premiere of the movie Ask, it's making me think we're heading down a meta Scream 3 New Nightmare route. Now, I'm not looking for a confirmation or a denial, but my nerd brain is latching me onto that idea. So I'm very curious to see how that fits in. I mean, obviously, like many of the things in Ask, you could be repurposing these B-roll shots as some other director, some other guy who's getting into this kind of three wishes scenario that you find yourself in the movie. That's interesting and all, but I do like a world in which Chris Vander Kay, the real person, is now playing a second fictional version of himself, remarking on the fictional Chris Vander Kay's movie that is in theaters. So I don't know if we're doing like a Jay and Silent Bob Take Hollywood situation. I'm not sure, but I will be the first person in line for where I could potentially see it, because I did hear Philly is a possibility on your radar as well, which that is my born and bred hometown, and I would be the guy camping overnight for Ask in theaters. So
Yes. Well, I will tell you, we're talking to some friends. There's a few places. Philly Film Society is one of the groups that we're trying to talk to just see if there's a possible way in there. And I think it could be. We have well, actually, Dan Scully, the guy who plays, he's in the movie as the
other
potential
guy,
client that sees through me immediately.
yeah,
He actually lives in the Philly area, and so he's a film critic in addition to being an actor and stuff. So there is definitely the potential that it'll happen. I don't want to promise anything yet, but that is definitely our hope. And yes, if we get one in Philly, we'll probably be shooting footage there as well.
that's awesome.
And as for the sequel, this is what I can tell you. You're not wrong. I repurpose stuff all the time. I would
Yeah,
say 80% of the first film is repurposed from actual things that are happening in my life.
sure.
But I will also tell you that I do appear in the second film playing the same character of Chris Vander Kay. So that's as much as I can spoil for you about it.
Interesting. Okay, well, my brain is definitely racing about the possibilities there. I'll temper my excitement so we don't spoil anything. But for those who are unfamiliar, again, I implore you to pause this video, check out Ask immediately, because we are probably going to head into Spoilerville for this film to some degree. I don't feel like doing a plot breakdown and Easter egg analysis, but we can, we're probably going to touch on some things that you'll want to see the movie and you should want to see it anyway. So if you are on the fence, Ask is a 2024 found footage horror film. Again, it's on Tubi. The synopsis reads as follows. Chris Vander Kay, a YouTuber in his mid 40s, which fact check, are we in our mid 40s?
Not now. I was when I shot it.
Oh, really?
Later 40s. Oh, this is 47. I'm
I'm about to
48.
be 40, so I'm creeping up to this terror limit as well.
I can see you in my rear view.
A YouTuber in his very early looking 40s takes a mysterious coach's advice to be brutally honest with his audience. His channel and life improve, but unforeseen darker consequences soon begin to unfold. And while a lot of synopses of movies, I think, don't really cover the bases when it comes to what you're about to see, that is a pretty good, summation of kind of the vibe of this movie. But before we get started on the questions, not to hear the echo of my own voice, I just want to tell you kind of what I loved about Ask, and may not have even gotten to it in my video because the sections in my video are so brief that I'm not going to sit and kind of go on forever. But while I'm talking to the guy who made the movie, I'll say that a few things really hit for me. You really don't see, especially in the found footage space, a lot of elevated horror. You usually have premise, genie, Dybbuk, paranormal spirit, and then death. But I think that Ask is a movie that, while it's not leaning on horror set pieces other than the what towards the end, it is a movie that is very philosophical. It's very meta, especially because you're watching something that was made for $250, starring a guy whose whole pathos is about making things happen out of nothing, about committing yourself and throwing yourself out there. And you're also watching a creative who made the movie do the exact thing that his character is kind of advocating for, be it in all the wrong ways that just kind of end up in disaster. So there's a meta context to it that I found really pleasing. There was the go-getter spirit of it that, you know, we'll get into a little later. As you watch the film, there are so many elements where you can tell, well, this is a guy that did not have the resources to even have another person in the room half the time. And yet I'm invested in a guy who's off screen for the entire movie, who you are dictating to the entire time. I feel bad for him. I'm curious about his mental health. And it's like a person that does not exist, that you don't even see a screen box in the corner for 2 seconds of. And yet you painted with pure imagination alone this whole canvas of events, be them tragic, be they funny, self-deprecating, that were comedic, but also really dark. And kind of when you lean back and watch the movie, there is this sad realization that you're watching somebody who wants the best for themselves, who is just destroying themselves at every single turn. And it's really a tragedy. I mean, it's a movie where you want to root for the guy, but you are kind of disgusted by the way that people treat him and the way that he's kind of shelling out advice without really believing in it. There is this level of artificiality to his character where it's like, does this guy even believe in himself? I don't know. Or is he just talking this game endlessly to try to get himself out of a lurch? And for that, that is really what gripped me. I mean, there were some scary moments, some kind of cosmic horror moments that I found also, of course, interesting. But there is more to ask than what you're seeing on screen, plot A point to B point, the end. And I think that, if I had to guess, is why you're experiencing such positive buzz, why you're experiencing the movie bouncing around from place to place, because not all the time in a found footage movie can you feel yourself in another character. It's more often than not, you're watching some asshole that you hate just get murdered in a cave. With your movie, it draws out a lot of emotions for you as a character, against you as a character, and there's so much more going on there than you would see. I mean, I know I said in my video when I watched the trailer, I laughed. It's because you don't understand that all of that is kind of baked into the DNA, that it is so self-deprecating. So yeah, I mean, the biggest props I want to give you is just that, you know, despite the budget, despite what you had to go with, you made something that could make another person really think. And that is its own impressive feat. So hats off to you. Love the movie, obviously. I could go on an hour about it, but I want to hear more about it from you, because that
Yeah.
is why we're here.
Well, first of all, I will say thank you very much for saying all of that because frequently when you're a filmmaker, especially when you're working in the arena like found footage, you are on an island when you're making it, and oftentimes for a long time when you're putting it out. You have no idea if it's going to connect, if it's saying what you were hoping it was going to say, if people are getting that from it. So basically, everything that you just said confirms a ton of what I was trying to do with the movie. So it feels good to feel like I wasn't whistling into the wind, you know, like the stuff I was trying to say did hit home. Um, as far as the character goes, it's always weird for me to talk about the character because I'm playing a guy named Chris Vander Kay and I'm Chris Vander Kay and I did a lot of the same career stuff that he did in the movie. So there is definitely some, you know, connective tissue between the two of us. But what I will say about this character that I think might be connecting with people is one of my ethoses with this film was if bad things are going to happen to this guy, we have to have some sense of sympathy for him in order for that to land. It's not going to be graphic what's happening to him, right? It's mostly going to be psychologically disturbing. It's going to be problems existentially. Well, the only way that you can feel compelled to care about a person like that, or to feel sad about those things, is if you care about a person. And so I thought I need to have a balance. He can't be just a victim, but he also can't be a dirtbag, right? Because, like you said, oftentimes you have characters that are unlikable. Like at the 45-minute mark, you're checking your watch for how soon before these people are going to start getting picked off. So I knew if I was going to be the primary character, I had to have sort of what I call like the film noir model, right? Of a character who's not entirely evil, but made some really stupid decisions, and those things will haunt him until the end. And because there's this sort of like, you know, in film noir, it's sort of almost this cosmic level of revenge, or of the worm turning. You did this one thing and it compounds and compounds, and eventually you've undone your entire life because of that mistake you made. And I felt like that was the key for me with him, is he couldn't just be a victim. He had to be someone who was just dumb enough and just like wanting enough to have made some very terrible decisions that ended up coming back to haunt him in a big way. So that to me was the key to unlocking this character, is like you can like him while at the same time you can see that he's making really stupid decisions because he sees an option for a shortcut to get him to fame or notoriety or money or whatever faster.
Right.
And to me, that was the key. And it's also the perfect allegory, I think, for what he does for a living, which is so many people who want to be influencers, they want to just take the shortcut. They don't want to do the work. They want to figure out what's the way that I can fool the algorithm into making people watch my shit so that I'm making money now, even though I didn't put in the hours.
Sure.
And so there's something about that idea of easy fame and the anonymity that comes with people not seeing your real life, only seeing the pieces that you show them. And so I was trying to play with all of that, and I think that's why people connect to it, because I think they recognize it maybe in themselves, but certainly in the people that they watch.
Yeah. I mean, as a struggling YouTuber, also almost 40s, gotta say it hit home, definitely. Not everybody's like me though, and people are still connecting with it. So it's a beautiful thing to see, definitely. Kudos again on the whole shebang at this point. It's just very impressive to watch. So I think you really achieved what your idea of this character was, because again, I've watched $100 million budgeted found footage movie where, like you said, I'm like, when will this end and people start dying? And for
Yeah.
me with you, the changes were much more incremental in the movie and more satisfying. I found myself just coming back to it like, I need to watch 20 more minutes of this, because I was like doing 1,000 things at once. And I kept thinking, well, what is going to happen to this guy? It's got to be something wild, and just kept drawing me back in. So thanks again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and part of what you're describing is that I didn't have any money, right? So my thing was like, what can I create that's going to haunt someone that doesn't cost me anything, right? And all of that real estate is in here. So for me, it was about, well, what are the existential things that people are terrified of?
Failure.
Ending and being forgotten. That's a big one. Like, what if
Sure.
I don't make an impact in the world? That's a huge fear that we all have.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, if I can make that existentially frightening, then I don't have to stab anybody in the face on camera. What I can do is have that will haunt you after it's over,
Right.
because you think about it about yourself. So of course you're going to think about it about this character too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I would like to drop into some nitty gritty here, in terms
I'm
of
ready.
ask things that have been kind of baking my noodle as I've been researching and watching. The first thing that I'm kind of wondering about, I know you have a background in screenwriting. In fact, Chris has since talked about in his Q&A that he kind of accidentally ended up sort of scripting a Hallmark Western. Yes, I will be watching that eventually. No, I did not have time to watch it today, but I'm going to find it. Is your name in the credits and everything still, or?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I get
Okay,
screenplay credit, me and
great.
one other person. I'm actually glad that you didn't see it before you spoke to me. I'm glad that you have to wait until after we've spoken for you to witness it.
Chris has said that they morphed his script after, and he got hit with the Hollywood treatment. But as a completionist, I may find my way there eventually. But in terms of ask, as a screenwriter and making something so freeform and cheap and with your own cell phone, did you feel the need to script this out fully, or were you working kind of with improv? What was your process in terms of writing an ask?
Yeah. When I write screenplays for other projects, I very heavily script. I do a lot of work to yeah, I do a pass that's just action, a pass that's just character. Like I really work it over. In this case, I did not have a script for two reasons. The first was I am not primarily an actor. I have done some acting. I did it in college. I took a couple of classes, but that was mostly to learn how to write more than to learn how to act. So I knew if I just wrote myself dialogue, it was going to be a slog to try and land what was on the page, because I know myself and I know I'm going to be trying to like say the line the way I wrote it. And if I'm not delivering it right, I just got to do take four, five, six. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm too lazy as an actor for that to be a possibility. So I didn't write dialogue. What I did is I came up with a fifty bullet point beat sheet of all of the scenes that I needed in the movie with a general idea. And by general, I literally mean like three sentences. This is what happens in this scene. The other reason that I did that is because, as I mentioned before, so much of what ended up in the movie was stuff that was repurposed from life. So there's a scene where I go to a convention where I'm coaching people. I do a presentation in front of them. That was actually happening. That was part of my job at the time. I worked as a legal marketing I teach attorneys basically how to market themselves. We were having an actual event. So there is a clip, a small clip in the movie when I'm doing a presentation and it's sort of shooting from the podium up at me. That was happening as I was doing a presentation in front of a bunch of attorneys.
It's so
Um,
funny because I
so
did the math on that in my own brain and just figured it was another way for you to like not have to show an audience. But it makes it even funnier that the people were actually there and it was for a
oh
completely
yeah.
different reason. That is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. There were like 17 attorneys in the room listening to the presentation that I was doing. But because of that, I knew that there were going to be places where I only get one bite at this apple. I was never going to be able to get this moment again. The footage I shot in Vegas, the stuff that was on the airplane, the police cars that were arresting a man in the background of a Publix parking lot. All of that was stuff that I called found moments, like it was happening in real time and I had to capture it, or things that I knew I was only ever going to get one pass at. Because of that, I couldn't script it out because there's no way I would be able to be paying attention to concentrate on getting dialogue right at the same time that something's happening in the real world. So I just said, I'm kind of going to have to wing it. I know what the emotional core of what this thing needs to be is, and I'm just going to get as close to it as I possibly can with the words that come into my brain. I'm a writer. I can probably write on the fly. Improv is writing on the fly, you know? So that's kind of the way I went about it. And, occasionally I would have to do reverse engineer, like when the scene with the cops in the parking lot was actually happening. When I just showed up to shoot the scene, a man was being pulled over and being arrested. I said, "There's no way in hell I'm not putting this in the movie. I have to figure out how to use it." So I just shot the scene with the cars in the background, and it wasn't until after I was done I was like, "Well, uh, spoiler alert, at this point in the story, people aren't paying attention to me anymore. So I'm like, oh, you know what? I can shoot a scene that comes right before this of me explaining what's going on, which is that I just shoplifted from this store. And since no one sees me because cosmically I'm invisible, they just assume some other guy did it. And so they're arresting him. And so I basically just reverse engineered from a real life circumstance and wrote to that moment happening. The same as with the teeth. When I knew I was going to have dental surgery, I was just like, all right, well, the first half of this movie, I got bad teeth, and then one day I'm going to wake up and I have great teeth. What's a story that I can build around that? So I didn't have a script in the strictest sense. I just had a bunch of vaguely detailed scenes that I knew that I needed, and then I knew I would just sort of find the moment as I was in it. So.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, in the same vein, I'm also curious about because everything was in your control, because you didn't need to worry about actors and scheduling and location scouting and all these other things. Did that affect your ability to shoot it chronologically? Did you decide to shoot it chronologically? Was it at all shot chronologically?
It was not shot chronologically. Perhaps it could have been, but I think there were, first of all, there's a lot of advantages to being the only person making the movie. One of which is I got a ton of scenes I never could have gotten if I had to have an actor that I was taking with me. They weren't going to let me fly another person out to Vegas with me for the event, right? So it was
Right.
either I was playing this role or we didn't have footage there. So that's one advantage. But I didn't shoot chronologically because I there were just going to be certain times where something was possible and it was either do it then or it doesn't get done, you know?
Right.
A lot of the talking head stuff I could shoot whenever. So I did a lot of that early. When I'm sitting in a car talking. There's actually a moment, the part where I'm in the airport and I'm looking at the screen and I'm eating an egg sandwich. One of the reasons that I was eating an egg sandwich in that scene is because I didn't get a chance to shoot that before I had the dental surgery. So I had my new teeth. So I had to have something in my mouth so that you couldn't see that I had new teeth in that one scene. So I had
Amazing.
to sort of so there was a lot of decision making involved in that. Like I wasn't going to be able to be on an airplane until after I had new teeth. Well, figure it out. You got to work around it. So a lot of the movie was decided more about what is the logistically most convenient time to be able to do this thing, or possibly the only realistic time to do this thing. That's when I did it. So it definitely was not chronological.
Hmm. Which cosmetic surgery do you think we're basing the sequel around then? You gonna go in for like a you gonna go in for like a boob job just to make it happen for the sequel? Do
Obviously, but it's the irony is it's breast reduction surgery. So
fair enough. So yeah, I mean, in the same sense, your parents are in the movie. I would assume your house is in the movie, your work is in the movie, maybe a work site is in the movie. How did you kind of schedule your home life and your time with your family, your friends, your job in and around the movie? Was there a schedule that you kind of kept in your mind or?
No, well, so I should say those are my in-laws, not my parents, but
Oh,
they actually, the
I
reason I'm
see why you
mentioning
made them
it,
disappear.
no, I love them. I
Yeah,
actually haven't spoken to my real parents in almost 15 years, so that's a whole other story. But no, those are my in-laws and my wife's parents, and they were great. And it's so funny that they ended up, there's a moment towards the end where there's a montage and you see like the younger version of them, and then it transitions into the older version of them.
yeah,
That was literally a random piece of B-roll footage we found on a site. And they just happened to look a lot like my in-laws, and so we did that transition. I couldn't believe that we found it and that it was that perfectly framed.
that's amazing.
So that's what I mean by like that kismet. But as far as the scheduling goes, I didn't schedule to shoot anything ever except for one day's shoot was actually scheduled, and it was because I had to go to a friend's house. The entire final act of the film, with all the security cameras where I go into the house, that was all done in a single day. Everything from the moment that I pull up in front of the house until the end of the movie was all shot in a single 4.5 hour shoot day, I think. But the rest of the time, it was literally like, I got to run to Culver's to get lunch for everybody. I'm going to shoot this scene of me eating this sandwich behind the Culver's, and I'm going to do it while I'm out.
Right.
And that's the way I shot most of the movie. And I think there's something about the anxious energy of knowing I have to get this thing done that helped my performance in some way.
Sure.
If I'd had an endless number of takes, I probably would have had a slightly more polished looking, but probably bloodless performance because I'm not an actor. Um, but I think some of the best things in the movie came from panic. The last scene of the movie, when I go outside and I'm sitting in the backyard, the pliers and all that, that was all done in a single take. I didn't have any choice. We shot everything else. It was raining outside when we started shooting, and I'm like, well, I don't know what we're going to do. We can't shoot outside while it's raining. So we shot everything else, got to the end of the day. That's all we had left. It was pouring rain. I did not have a change of clothes, so I knew I was going to get one pass at this. I go outside, I'm going to get soaked. So I have to get this right in this first take. And if I don't, we're screwed. And so I went in the bathroom and I fucking pointed at my own face in the mirror and I was like, you got to get this shit done. And then I went out and I just shot the whole thing. We did it basically in one single uninterrupted take. You've seen, the one take to the camera, and then there's a couple of other security camera style shots of other cameras. But we did it all in one take. It was, well, I say I did it all in one take.
Yeah.
And that nervousness, me being just shit scared that I was gonna mess it up, and then we were done, and the huge climax of the movie is wasted. That anxiety was, I think, what really helped the performance in the final 5 minutes of the movie. So
Yeah, I mean, I love the rain aspect to it. I thought it made it kind of a really memorable setup. Honestly, I mean, I'm sure it was a pain in the ass, but it definitely was worth it.
yeah, I mean, I think it looks great. I
It
couldn't have
does.
planned it.
Yeah.
And there are some people that were like, "How did you do the rain effect?" I said, "Every single drop hitting my face is not an effect. I had to sit in the friggin' rain. I was freezing my ass off out there. That's not an effect."
So speaking of panic and speaking of staring at the mirror and pointing at yourself and saying, "We got to do this," what would you say your biggest single moment of doubt was while you were making Ask? What was the moment where you were like, if any, I mean, I don't know if it happened at all, but was there a moment where you were like, what the hell am I doing right now?
Yes, ironically, it came after I shot the whole movie. It was after the film was done. I was editing it, and there were two speed bumps to this film ever finding an audience. The first was that I recorded the entire movie on the audio from the headphones I was wearing.
Right.
That was the mic that I used. Well, I had two different mics. The ones that came from Apple sounded great. The other ones, which are like black ones that they go over your ears, they're like the workout ones that won't slip out.
Yeah.
The audio for those was awful.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine had to work the audio over. It was tinny, it was quiet, there was a buzz to it. I genuinely thought I shot like 35% of the movie with that, and they sounded like garbage. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because some of the scenes I can't reshoot. It
Yeah.
was in Vegas, it was, all these places. And thankfully he was able to like work a miracle on it, and we got it done. There are still scenes where it's a little quiet, and I would love to have been able to fix that, but that was a mistake I made as a first-time filmmaker. So that was one that I
Yeah.
was worried, but we got it fixed. The big one, the one where I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. This is an abysmal failure, is that I say that the budget was $250, but the truth is it was less than 100 because 150 of it was money I spent entering it in film festivals,
Hmm.
all of which turned the movie down. It was rejected from at least three, maybe four festivals. I can't remember all of them, but like, there was a couple of them that I thought were like shoe-ins. The Unnamed Footage Festival is like a literal. They only show found footage and fake documentary movies. I'm like, these are my people, and they were like politely, but they're like, this doesn't fit what we're doing for this, you know. And I was that hurt, and then it was Chattanooga, and then it was, and then so they kept coming, and it were all rejections, and I was like, oh, I might have just a piece of shit on my hands here. I might not have any objectivity, and this might be garbage, and nobody has any interest in it. And thankfully, Mary Beth McAndrews, who is the editor in chief of Dread Central, and she came on board as a producer, she was like, listen, you only spent $250 on this. We don't have to light the world on fire to get it in front of millions of people. What we need to do is get it out where people can find it because there are a lot of found footage fans. We just have to find them. So she was like, why don't we just try and go straight to distribution? And she luckily was the one that knew the people at POV Horror who put the movie out. She had been on a panel with them, ironically, at the Unnamed Footage Festival that it was not accepted to. But she met him there, and I think maybe he was a screener for the festival or something because he knew what the movie was.
Hmm.
And so when she told him, he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we would definitely put that out." So the irony is that I entered to four festivals and nobody showed it, but then
Right.
I only ever submitted it to one distributor and they immediately took it. So you just, I was panic stricken for those whatever month and a half I was waiting for all the results, and then it immediately got picked up. And then as soon as it was available places where people could actually see it, it was being very well received.
Yeah.
Aside from a small handful of people that understandably maybe don't want to stare at my face for 90 minutes, but pretty much everybody else has been really kind about it. So
I challenge you to
yeah,
find
so
me
you
any found footage film that somebody doesn't hate with all their heart. So I would
yeah, I mean
agree
there's always
personally.
going to be I'm not going to lie. I genuinely thought it was going to be much more sharply divided with much more even on either side of it. And who knows? Maybe as it gets to more and more of an audience, that will start to balance out. But
Right.
I would say I genuinely feel like it's about a 90-10 split right now for positive versus negative, which is insane for a movie that costs this little
Yeah.
and and is decidedly not a typical found footage film. It's very different from most of what's out there. So, I'm considering myself incredibly lucky.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said in the video that I included asked in on a couple weeks ago. Um, I didn't jump for the movie until I saw so many positive comments. And usually, where there's smoke, there's fire. That's how I find all of my recommendations. I almost never go off of online lists, rankings, anything like that. All I need to do to latch on to something and give it a shot is to see like five people say, like, this one really did it for me. And I'm at the point of my film criticism and kind of overall idea on film in general in that you're never going to reach consensus. It's something I learned after The Last Jedi came out. It's something I learned when kids told me Jurassic Park 3 was the worst Jurassic Park movie. And I was like, how dare you? It's
Come
all
on, there's a talking velociraptor in it. What are you talking about? It's the worst.
exactly what could possibly go wrong. So yeah, I mean, I think that if I were to ever kind of approach the found footage medium or try to make something myself, I would have to keep telling myself that there's always going to be somebody that dislikes something. There's always going to be somebody that would rather tear something down than give it a shot. But when you see, it's almost like looking at the audience meter on Rotten Tomatoes, where you're like, look, regardless of what people are saying about this movie, if this amount of people are saying, I had fun with this, I enjoyed this meant something to me, then that's what I'm going to go with. I'm a critic, so I'm not going to go around saying don't listen to critics, only listen to fans. But I think as your found footage find show also highlights that there is room for both opinions. There's room for the fan pick as there is from a pick from a director, a pick from somebody who may know what they're talking about and have an eye for history. Who knows? But with found footage, it really comes down to just seeing people, how they react to things and the discourse around it. And I think for Ask, it's been really positive. I'm sure you feel some level of surprise at the reception. Like you were just saying, you were thinking maybe it would be more polarizing. And I really don't see that for this. I just see a lot of positivity, which is great. I mean, and to touch on what you were talking about before about the audio, I mean, of course, that's kind of the elephant in the room from a production point of view with Ask. But I challenge that in my own way because it's endearing because you know that the person who made the movie is using all that they have. And, to sit around and be like, I'm not going to watch this because the audio is fuzzy in a certain scene is crazy because it's found footage. It's expected that if you're watching a character who has earbuds in, who's talking to his editor, you wouldn't expect it to sound like NPR. So there is kind of like a built-in defense system. And that's the same way with a lot of found footage movies where You give it more leeway because if you went and saw an A24 movie and everybody was speaking into earbuds, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on here? But with a movie like Ask, it's like, this makes sense. I can ride with this, even though it's not the most polished thing in the world. Again, in the found footage genre, polish is low on the list in terms of what draws people in. So I wouldn't dwell on it too much because I think you did the damn thing with it, and I could hear everything fine. I didn't have to put on subtitles or hold my phone up to my head at any point. And I watched it on a phone the first time I watched it. I watched it on my TV last night, but I watched it on a phone first throughout a work day at my computer, and it was perfect. I mean, like you've said in some of the discussions I've seen you in before, the thing about found footage is you're watching it on the medium you communicate in. And when you're talking to your buddy on a FaceTime call, yeah, it could sound like shit. And so there is, its own level of like kind of built-in meta narrative that you can kind of walk your way out of. That I kind of played in my own head while watching it. So it worked for me, but
Yeah. Well,
I
and
could
you
see
also
sitting
touched
in
on
an
something.
editing bay and being like, holy shit, what have I done? No, but I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah. Just flop sweating about how bad it's going to be. You did hit on something though about found footage fans, which I really appreciate, and I feel like is maybe the only genre, horror to some degree, but I think the subcategory of found footage horror is more true, which is people, fans of found footage films, listen to each other more than they listen to anyone else.
yeah,
And it's because they know that they're the only other people that are this passionate about it. Like you said, I don't go to look at lists of, the 15 best found footage movies of the 2000s. Because, first of all, they're all movies you've already seen.
yeah,
Because nobody who's doing a top 15 of the 2000s is going to bring you anything that surprises you. But secondly, there's no, everything, I used to describe it as like a spring water, right? The good stuff bubbles up through the stones to reach us. With other movies, it gets dumped on us from above, with tons of money and all the coverage. When a found footage movie gets recommended to you, it has had to work its way through a dozen people or a handful of platforms or whatever work it has done to get to you. It is done because people enjoyed it genuinely and then recommended it organically.
right.
And it's the reason why I've tried very hard. I don't know if I've gotten everybody, but almost anyone that anytime I found a post about Ask talking about it, positive or negative, or a comment on a post that I did, I try to respond to every single one and thank them because especially with found footage films, we all make money based on people watching the stuff whenever they're paying with their time, right?
Right.
When you watch something on Tubi, you're not paying me money, but your stream is what makes me the money. So you devoting your time to watching it and then also talking positively about it to someone else means they're going to devote their time to it. So it is incredibly valuable because they are basically my advertising. They're my promotions. And so it means a lot to me when a found footage filmmaker, like when you made that video, the 15, like I know that you said you're a struggling YouTuber, but your channel is huge in terms of like a found footage filmmaker being recommended to someone, right? A found footage filmmaker on my level, having access to an audience of the size that you have, the number of people that watch your films is enormous. So I'm incredibly grateful to the found footage audience. And it's also the only one that does this, right?
Yeah,
Like I'm in a group where me, Adrian, Sophie, like you
yeah,
said, can be
VM.
commenting alongside people who are just fans. Like
Yeah,
that doesn't happen. I think I joked about like I can't just go online and talk to the dude that made last week's NCIS episode. You know what I
right.
mean? Like that's not
Yeah,
how that works. But this genre, we stand sort of shoulder to shoulder in some ways.
yeah.
Found footage filmmakers are also found footage fans, and there's much more connectivity between those communities.
Yeah, and I mean honestly, it's reinvigorated the genre in a lot of ways that guys like you and Fionn Watts and Adrian Sofé, who are so active and present around their work publicly in forums and beyond, it's created such a level playing field for kind of engaging and interacting, and it benefits you as well. I mean, all of that in the background is just pushing your name, pushing your face, pushing your product further and further and further, but in a way that benefits everyone. It's not just like we made a trailer that you have to watch, before in the middle of a sports game. It's not this like pandering, like, here's your product, sir. It's like a community birth almost when these movies come out. And when, all of a sudden Chris Vander Kay is being embraced by this whole community when a week beforehand, no one had a clue who this guy was. And then it's all of a sudden you see him everywhere. You're like, this guy's really in it. And then especially with found footage finds, I think you're showing another side of yourself that engages people even more. Like this guy's got an eye for history. This guy is obviously deeply steeped in his recommendations and his ability to cull together. I think you said 1,900 titles that you've organized on. Was it IMDb or
Letterboxed.
Letterboxd?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean it's all a community thing, but in many ways it's making found footage become this thing that it never was. There's this huge gap in found footage from like kind of Cloverfield until like 2020, where I started making these videos because I was like, I just want somewhere to put this all down and be like, someone can look back in history and be like, remember that genre that never fucking went anywhere? Here's like a piece of history where this guy's clocking what he loves about it, what he has seen that he loves in it. Whereas now it's like, I almost feel like my first found footage video, which was like Lake Mungo and just like very obvious choices to the found footage community at large. Now I look at that as like, that's kind of not my favorite video because we're at a point in this community where people are like turning over rocks that you would never expect in 1,000 years and really doing the research and watching whole franchises and, going to probably things like your event in Houston. I mean, these are things that major studios couldn't get people to, line up to see Apollo 18 or As Above, So Below. Those were movies that flopped economically, would be my assumption in many cases. And like, it's amazing to see where we're at now and kind of guys like yourself that are leading the charge into something greater. And I think when you make your next film, you're going to find that all these people that turned you down the first run are going to be like, hell yes, the second time. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it in that sense.
Yeah. Well,
So
I also want to say though, because I don't want this to be forgotten. The first video that you said you made, it was not your favorite one because there's, like seems like I would point out that perhaps the reason that you feel like that about that now though is because you were one of the people that is recommending the stuff that gets people to go out there,
yeah,
And when they start searching and they realize they like the genre, then they keep searching. One of the reasons why the genre seems like it wasn't around is because there just wasn't a huge community of support to point people towards stuff. Usually the trajectory is, I saw Blair Witch Project. I love that. I want to go find more movies like this. And then they find whatever 10 ripoffs that came out about it the next decade, and they're like, oh, these are all garbage. So I guess there was only one good one, and they don't watch anything else. But when they stumble onto a video that you made that has 15 fantastic ones and they watch Lake Mungo and they're like, holy crap, completely different from Blair Witch, but still documentary style, still incredibly effective. Okay, there's a lot of different things this genre can do. And what that does is it bolsters them to feel like it's okay to get a couple of failures and keep trying
sure,
because when you get the good one, there's nothing better than the feeling of finding the good one that you haven't heard anybody else talk about because now
totally.
you get to be the guy. You
Yeah.
get to be the one that shares it with everybody. You mentioned Fionn Watts. I saw Black Daruma, his film, the week that it came out, and I was
Oh,
like, this is a concept that is insane to me. It's such a simple and obvious
yeah.
idea. The
Yeah.
framework of the way it's filmed. How is it possible that someone didn't do this before now?
He
But
got
they
there,
hadn't,
man. They
and
got
they
there.
just did it. Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
such a good idea. And that's one of the great things about found footage is the innovation of the genre. Because we make movies fast, first of all, and second of all, because they're so driven by technology, found footage is usually on the cutting edge of whatever new filming thing is happening. We were the first ones to make an entire movie that was shot with a 360 camera. We were the first ones to make a movie that took place entirely on a computer screen.
Yeah.
We were the first ones to make a movie that mimicked another genre so perfectly that people didn't know. The movie The War Game that came out in the 60s by director Peter Watkins, it won Best Documentary in 1967.
Right.
It's not even a documentary, but it won Best Documentary.
Yeah.
And so the groundbreaking nature of this genre, I don't think a lot of people recognize how we should be taking the genre seriously because it does so many innovative things. It
Yeah.
just doesn't get the credit because the bar is lowered for who can make them. There's just a lot more crap to sift through. But the good stuff is really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to nerd out about found footage in a minute or two here, but I want to bomb you with some quick lightning round questions
I'm
about
ready.
Ask.
I mean,
If you had any budget in the world, infinite budget, cheat unlocked, who would you have cast as Chris Vander Kay?
oh Jesus, I wouldn't put that burden on anyone but myself. Um, who wants to walk around knowing that they had to play me when I actually exist?
Yeah.
No, so here's the joke that I always say about this movie is that if I wasn't in it, it would have been the most expensive no budget film of all time. Because of all the shit that you would have had to do for someone else to
Mhm.
make this work. What would you have to create fake bad teeth for the
Yeah.
first half of a movie or create fake good teeth for the second half? Would have had to fly some dude to Las Vegas and then to Kentucky, and you would have had to have him shoot on an airline while he was doing it. Like
Right.
all of the things that would have been required of another person would have made this movie cost thousands of dollars,
Hmm.
um, instead of the, whatever, 147 that I probably spent on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would argue that I also wouldn't make this movie if I had all the money in the world. I would
Sure.
have made a different thing.
Well,
Like I believe in the idea that like a biological entity exists at the size that it does because it's right for its environment.
yeah.
Like this movie doesn't make any sense if I spend $5,000 on it. Like what the hell
Sure.
were you thinking? It shouldn't have been that much.
I totally
But at
agree.
the price that I made it for, it looks like a fucking bargain?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nerd question. If
Yep.
you had to classify it, what type of cryptid, spirit, jinn, or creature would you classify the antagonist of the film as?
This is going to look like I'm the cop out, but I'm going to answer that question in the second film. So
Oh
I
boy.
don't want to answer it now.
Love that
So is
answer.
that a fair enough answer?
Oh,
Like I promise you to
100%.
get the answer. I just don't want to give it to you the second because it's definitively going to be clarified in the second movie.
All right,
Yeah.
say no more. All right, now quick game here. This is again a very much a lightning round. This is going to be similarity and differences between real Chris Vander Kay and fake Chris Vander Kay.
Okay, I'm ready. This is like an episode of that Bravo show. You're like what is it? Watch what happens
Watch
live.
what happens live. Number
I love it.
one. Have you ever actually made any ASMR content?
Just the piece that you saw in that video. I watch a ton of ASMR content. I've
Do
never
you
made
really?
any. Yeah. Yeah, that's how I go to sleep at night. ASMR content.
Do you actually regularly get quote jacked up on chai tea?
I am going to be honest with you. I don't know that I've ever even had chai tea. I just think it sounded funnier than saying coffee in the moment.
That's so
So I
funny.
chose that. There's something to be said about like they always say that a joke is better if you use like weird specificity. So I
Yeah,
chose chai tea as opposed to coffee because it sounded like a funnier way to get jacked up.
sure. I agree. I mean, I like chai tea, but my wife's pregnant right now, so she's doing a lot of the chai thing. She said it's like way more caffeine than she realized. So totally agree. Do you have an Indian editor named Ravi?
I do not have an Indian editor named Ravi. However, there is a guy named Ravi who I have worked with to build a website weirdly, after I made the movie and made up a dude named Ravi. Since then, I had to work with a guy to build the website for my company, and his name is Ravi.
That's
So
a
it was kind of
self-fulfilling
a weird,
prophecy.
yeah, yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Fictional Chris says that he does not like reading or writing and prefers audiobooks. Do you feel the same way?
No, I don't. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've never listened to an audiobook, I don't think. I do a ton of writing. I don't do a ton of reading of fiction. I used to read a ton of nonfiction related to the movie world.
Sure.
So, books of celebrities or, the making of this particular, the making of Jaws or whatever.
Yeah.
Used to read a ton of that. But and I do a lot of writing. So no, I'm not afraid of the written word. I like it more than the spoken word, honestly.
Interesting. So far, fictional Chris is pretty different than real Chris.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe they seem closer in my head because I'm playing
Yeah.
them, but yeah, you're right. There are a lot of
We're getting to
factors
the
there.
nitty-gritty differences here. Did you actually visit an old-time Connecticut cemetery and get depressed in it?
No, no. I mean, I've probably been like I used to live up in Connecticut, so I'm sure that we probably used to go to places like that. That's how I know they exist. But no, I don't think I ever had an existential crisis as a child, noticing that there was a tombstone that didn't have a name on it anymore. No, it just seemed like a very poetic way to get into an important
Right.
point that I was trying to make with the movie, and that seemed like the most fun and circuitous way for a dumb guy like me to have found that piece of sort of moving or poetic information.
Sure. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Have you ever actually ran from the police?
no, I don't know. It's funny that I had to think about that,
Yeah,
right?
you
Like, are
did.
there any instances of running from the police? No, I've never run from the police. I don't think I've ever had any encounters with the police aside from the guy knocks at the door because somebody robbed the house several doors down, wanted to know if I saw anything. I don't think
Right.
I've ever had any police encounters.
Do you ever actually practice nervous air punching and double flipping the bird at your cell phone before a speaking event?
Uh, it's not my exact routine before I speak, but I definitely have a pregame. Yeah, I have pregame jitters. Normally, it just involves me pacing back and forth, only about 4 feet back and forth,
Right.
so it looks to anyone else, it looks like absolute insanity.
Right.
But yeah, I will just circle endlessly backwards behind, and I'll just. I used to do this thing when I was a kid where I would say something and then I would silently repeat the words to myself to
Hmm.
like see if it sounded right to me. And people always thought that I had some sort of like learning disability because they thought that I was like still talking without words coming out.
Sure.
But so I just do the reverse now. I say it quietly beforehand, and then when I go out, hopefully it's right. So that's my no punching, but a whole lot of weird whispering.
And finally, in the lightning round, at this point in your burgeoning career, would you ever still make a series of supernatural wishes if they were offered for free and actually worked?
Listen, that is probably the one thing I most have in common with with the guy in the movie. Like if someone came to, there have been more than one time when I've made a bad decision working with someone because it seemed like it was going to benefit me in my career, which is the reason why I've had one screenplay made in a decade and a half, and I had to go make my own stuff. So I've definitely, it wasn't like a gin or anything, but I've definitely made some stupid partnerships with some people that
Yeah.
ended up biting me in the ass seriously. So yeah, I would say that is definitely the thing I probably have most in common with fictional Chris is
I'm glad
yeah,
we finally found one at the end there. That's good.
yeah, the
I don't,
arguably the worst one, but
yeah,
yes, we have it in common.
sure. All right. That is kind of everything I wanted to talk about with Ask, even though I could do this all day. I'm sure you can and will as well for the next few months of your life. Um, I did want to save some time to talk about found footage finds and a bit about found footage itself. So, again, found footage finds now streaming on Found TV. Incredible opportunity. I'm sure there is a rich story behind how you've manifested yourself into this position of extreme jealousy on my end. I think that you're doing the Lord's work by doing a series like that. And I know you're seeing the positive results in terms of the reaction so far. I've seen nothing but praise in terms of found footage finds because you are offering the resource that everybody in this community wants. They want an expert who is down to earth, who can kind of break things down in a way that's not going to feel highfalutin and beyond, the pale of reasoning, but still using kind of big brain ideas to talk about philosophy, talk about the kind of psychosis that has been caused by real found footage, by fake found footage. It's a series that I don't feel the need to kind of ask you 100 different questions about like Ask, because I think that if you're interested in this kind of thing, you got to just go and watch this series. It's such an easy digest for people. 30 minutes goes by in a second because you've structured it in a way that is so tight, and it's got such an airtight formula that within 2 episodes I'm like, can't wait for the fan picks part, can't wait for this. Like it's very well put together, and it seems really well organized, and very professional. I love the tiny mic that you're holding, and I just really am just impressed by it so far. So again, another big kudos here for creating something that hopefully will have a lot of staying power, that hopefully they'll keep on that app and maybe spread to elsewhere. Are you kind of hooked to having it there? They allow you to kind of take that elsewhere, like Ask might be able to be taken elsewhere, or
Yeah, yeah. So the deal I made with Found TV was, first of all, I love Found TV. The second that they existed, I was like, I want to get something on Found TV. That's like
yeah,
it became an immediate bucket list thing, just because there are a few places, POV horror, Found TV in particular, that have a clear love for found footage. Now Tubi has a ton of found footage stuff. But it feels kind of like, how Paramount used to put out the Friday the 13th movies, but they wouldn't say they were particularly proud of them.
yeah,
That's kind of how it feels with Tubi, right? Like they know people are going to come and watch their stuff. So they'll put it in the recommendations, but they don't necessarily have a dedicated found footage section and they don't
yeah,
advertise them on the front page and they don't really make any originals. What I like about found and POV horror is that that is their interest. That's their
yeah,
primary focus. That's what they want to raise. So when I was talking to Louis and Monica at Found Footage or at Found TV, they were just so passionate, and it's still a new channel. It only started in October of 2024, so it's only been around for over half a year. But in that time, they've helped so many people and also raised the platform for so many filmmakers and the genre that I was like, I'll tell you what, this is eventually going to be at other platforms. I'm going to submit this to other places, but let's do an exclusive premiere with you guys because it makes sense to premiere here. First of all, it was kind of cool. I didn't realize it's the first nonfiction programming that's ever been on Found. Everything else there is fictional. So this is the very first documentary series. But then it feels like found footage finds is what found TV itself is, which is a
Yeah.
place where you went and you just found a shit ton of stuff you didn't know about that's awesome, and now you've got this reservoir that you can pull from. And that's what I wanted the show to be. So I was like, let's do that. Let's do the exclusive for the month of June. Sure, it will probably pop up elsewhere. I'm sure hopefully it'll end up on Tubi, which is, where most of the eyeballs find stuff like this. But I wanted to start with a place that seemed like they were the right people to shepherd it into the world.
Right.
But to answer your question, yes, the goal is it will probably towards the end of June. I'll be submitting it to other places, and we'll see, who bites.
Awesome.
So
Great. Well, obviously, wish you luck in that endeavor as well. The more people that see things like that are just the bigger the community becomes. And to me, like you were just saying, it's almost like you're watching like ABC Family Night and then the news comes on. That's what it feels like on Found TV. It's like, well, I just watched a found footage movie. Let me pop the news on and see what Chris thinks. It's very fitting to be on the app, and it's very fitting at kind of this time and place of the community when people don't just want lists. That's why I'm seeing success on my YouTube channel. I think it's because people want just one step beyond that, for somebody to be passionate about it, for somebody to do their homework, and someone you can trust with what they're saying, with what they're putting out there. And what better bona fides than having your own found footage movie already in the can? This is not just some guy like, hanging out in a construction site. It's a director hanging out in a construction site. And that's what we all wanted. So
it's not loitering if you're doing something.
it's no shame. I manage a hardscaping company as my day job. So when I did my list of 50 hidden gem horror movies, I filmed everything at the construction site at night. And as soon as I saw Ask, I was like, oh my God, my man's got an in on a construction site too. We got a lot in common going on here.
Yeah. Well, yes, you would think I had an in, and not
Oh
just
boy.
that
See,
I
this is what I
showed
was
up.
worried about. You're
You
like,
wouldn't
I
think that
literally jump the fence and do it every weekend.
who would have the audacity to show up at all of those places on a Sunday afternoon when no one's working to just shoot his footage and then disappear?
True
Who would
maniac.
ever do that?
And
But I did want to say that the other thing I feel like that does differentiate found footage finds from any of the other recommendations is I was like, it was very important to me that each episode was focused on a specific subgenre. And the reason for that is because it makes it much easier to do a deep dive on what the impact of this specific type of movie is when that's all you're talking about. Like I could do a top this, or I could do a filmmaker feature or whatever. But then the problem is that it becomes about something else other than the subgenre itself. And what really cracked it open for me was like, oh, if I do an episode about zombies, I get to talk about how George Romero birthed the modern zombie and kind of birthed the found footage zombie genre. I get to interview four filmmakers or have four filmmaker interviews pop up there. I get to talk about the most obscure found footage films and then the three most popular zombie like it suddenly sort of coalesced in a way that I don't think it would have had I not had that clear division. And I also think it's good for fans because they get to look at the list of the 5 episodes, and while they will probably watch all 5, there's going to be one or two that are going to be like, ah, that's my jam right there. So I'm just going to write down every single movie he talks about in this one if I haven't seen it,
yeah,
because I like the idea that somebody will see, oh, episode 2 is just screen life, and that I love screen life. So I'm just gonna anything he says or any clip that they show, I'm gonna write down. There's something fun about the idea of knowing. Like I told you, I have a list of 1,900 movies, yes, but that's a huge amount of something to dump on somebody. Just because I found them all doesn't mean you'll like them all.
yeah.
But if I divide it into the categories, you can tell which ones you like, and then you get to choose to dive more deeply into one or the other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of traveling down that path now where like I look at my list and instead of saying, every 15 movies I'm going to make a video, like I did what I did the other day where it was the most controversial found footage films of all time. And something
Mhm.
about the fact that this genre has 8,000 different categories and subgenres, it really lends to the kind of organizational project that you've undertaken in the series. And can't wait to see it keep playing out. I heard in the Q&A that you're doing like a reality TV sort of episode at some
Yeah,
point
reality
soon.
TV and newscasts.
Are
Yep.
we doing Shooting the Warwicks?
I don't want to spoil everything, but I'll
Okay.
spoil that. Yeah, of course, I
That was
talk
the
about shooting the
that was the
Olympics.
first
Yeah,
one that popped into my mind. I was like, good Lord, anytime anyone says like reality TV movie, I think of that movie. It's so
yeah. No, I
ridiculous.
love Adam Rifkin. He's one of those guys that's like he's super famous. Like he wrote Small Soldiers and he wrote Underdog. Like he's done big budget movies, but he has I think three different times he's made found footage movies. He made the movie Look and then the TV show Look, which is all security camera style. It's like basically like a kaleidoscopic story of a bunch of people, but all seen through security cameras. And then he did Shooting the Warwicks, and then he did a film starring Penn Jillette called Director's Cut, which is like a hybrid of found footage and then also like pieces of a stolen movie that Penn Jillette's character like took from a Hollywood movie. So I'm very impressed by him because he doesn't have any reason to keep doing this other than that he loves it. He could be
Yeah.
making the much bigger budget movies and, getting, he may still be getting big paychecks, but he comes back to this because he loves this arena.
Right. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm looking forward to what's coming next, and I have bugged you a few times to just tell me, and we will all be watching with bated breath to see the rest of the season. And I think that if anybody's watching this and is kind of hearing you talk about things like a Penn Jillette half found footage movie, they can obviously tell that you are very knowledgeable and I've obviously done a tremendous amount of thinking about the genre. And that leads me to kind of some general discussion questions from nerd to nerd when it comes to found footage. Things that I would ask anybody who's in the genre, who's creating work right now in that space, and kind of pick their brain about. This is for funsies. What do you think is missing from the found footage genre? Now, I have also kind of my own answers to these. So if you need to think about it, I can offer up an idea or two. But that's the first thing I was wondering. What do you think is missing from found footage?
Well, I mean, regardless of the fact that I have an answer ready to go, I still want to hear what you think because I'm always
Sure.
curious about what people think.
I mean,
For me, the thing that's missing, sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I thought you were queuing me up.
Oh, I was queuing up to make sure that you didn't not bring it up when I was done
You
giving you my
start
answer.
first, then,
Um,
please.
but ambition, I think swinging for the fences is not something that happens enough in found footage. Um, I frequently see the idea that there is a lowered threshold for being able to make a movie in terms of budget and logistics. It's usually it does one of two things, and the one that it does is not as beneficial as the other. The first thing that it does is it allows literally anybody with a camera to go make a thing. That is in theory a great thing. But it also means that people don't necessarily put a ton of effort into the creativity or the originality or the quality of a film. And I don't mean quality like how come you didn't spend more on a film? I mean on the camera equipment. I mean how come you didn't spend more time making it a quality piece of entertainment, you know?
Sure.
Um, I am of the opposite opinion. If you're not spending much money, you can do anything with this. The sky is the limit, right? You don't have any producers telling you what you have to do in act two and why your characters need to be this or that. And you don't none of that is there. And possibly for the only time in your career, because if it becomes popular and then people do want to give you money to make movies, they're going to have demands of you. So now, while you're spending almost no money and you have all the control, why are you not swinging for the fences, doing anything that you could possibly dream of as long as you can figure out a way to capture it on camera? So that to me is the piece that's missing.
Right.
There's a ton of movies, and I love them in many genres, but like four dudes go out in the forest and fuck around for 2 days and slap the footage together and put it out as a film.
Right.
Some of those can be great accidentally. Some of those are usually intentionally terrible.
Yeah.
But but we can dream bigger than that, you know?
Yeah.
Like the whole point of Ask was twofold. One was that it cost almost nothing, but two was that it was a very original story. It was an idea that, I mean, not original, it's the monkey's paw for the YouTube generation, but I just mean in terms of the found footage arena, it is original. That's
Yeah.
not something you see. And also, like, I feel like I shaped some interesting, crazy things that happened in that story in ways you wouldn't have expected without really spending much money. And that was my hope to inspire people was like, it's not just you don't have to spend money. It's also you can do really wild, interesting things without spending money.
Sure.
And that's what I want. I want to see that ambition. I want to see you swing for the fences.
Yeah. I mean, kind of what I think is missing is touching back on the beginning of our conversation, which at one point I said kind of elevated horror is what's missing. But really, what I mean by that, and again, this is something that Ask did successfully, that not a lot of movies are trying at all. The ambition's there in a lot of cases. The scenery's there. You've got everything picked out, thought out. And I think that sometimes theme gets kind of lost in the mix. I think that there is kind of a lack of thematic found footage movies, things like Inner Demons, where you watch it and you're like, this is a movie about one thing for sure. But there is something to take home in the ideas being presented beyond what you're just seeing on screen. So there is a
Yep.
certain, and it is touches on what you said in terms of ambition. There is a certain depth that I think that, look, people start these movies because they're like, I could do that. I, have access to an old abandoned hospital. I have access to this and that. And sometimes the theme gets left behind. Now, there are people that don't want themes in their horror movies. This has been proven 1,000 times over in the rift between A24 and kind of the rest of horror society, is because people don't want to be kind of lectured in one way or another. They don't want to see Hugh Grant make terrific points about Jar Jar Binks and Catholicism. They just want to see people get ripped up by a dinosaur. I like those movies too, but I think that, an opportunity is kind of right there for found footage, that you have the ability to do something new and creative like Black Daruma did, but you also have the ability to do something like what Ask did, where you didn't have a conceit like you're looking through the eyes of a doll, but you had something that would be provocative and is worth thinking about after. So from a galaxy brain standpoint, that's what I think is missing. And then as a complete nerd, this is going to be my next question, which I'll just kind of answer up front on my own. What do you think is missing conceptually from found footage? For me, I find that what's missing is whether it's cryptids, whether it's aliens, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's paranormal spirits, what have you, there is a lack of non-antagonistic cryptids, monsters, aliens, forces like that. It's always like, I'm watching a movie, it's found footage, it's about aliens. They are for sure going to be killing people the entire time, and that's what you're going to get. I think there is an intellectual gap that's missing that I think we will see as the genre continues to get stronger, where movies like Hostile Dimensions, for example, that introduces concepts that aren't inherently nefarious. I mean, the things that happen end up becoming nefarious, but that's a lofty sci-fi idea. That's something that you can kind of draw something more meaningful out of. It's the difference between War of the Worlds or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They both are important pieces of work. They're both movies about aliens coming to Earth and turning everything upside down. But one is, a heartwarming, deeply emotive piece of film, and the other's like, look how badly aliens will fuck you up. And I feel like we're missing the other hander there, which is just like, I want to see more movies where a mystery is kind of addressed, but it doesn't always end up with a dude just dying in the corner of a room at the end of the movie. So that's
Yeah.
something I think would be interesting to see kind of explored more. Is there anything, and this is as somebody who has spent now an entire season breaking down subgenres and things like that, is there a subgenre of horror? Is there a conceptual idea that you think is kind of missing from the fray at this point? Have we done everything that there is to do in terms of Bigfoot, aliens? I mean, there has to be something more there. Is there something you would add to the conversation?
Yes. I will say, though, interestingly, the two things that you brought up for these last two questions, I think have something in common, which is that there's a literary element that you're referring to. Both of those things are connected, I believe, to literature. The idea of using allegorical storytelling, right, to tell a deeper story. You've got your surface story, and then I use call it what's happening and what it's about, right? Those are two different things.
Sure.
What's happening are the events. What it's about is what the deeper meaning that's happening under the surface. And that's literary. And then the other thing you're talking about, which is the idea of the conceptual elements, that where we're not exploring the less obvious aspects of a story. Like we go for the red meat instead of instead of what else we could explore. Both of those things tend to me to be from a lot of other film has a literary birthplace. A lot of old movies used to come from stage plays or used to be adapted from books.
Sure.
So those things were brought in with it. Found footage does not have that same tradition, and so some of those things I think are missing. They can be brought in, but the only way that happens is that people who are steeped in that kind of storytelling become comfortable and conversant and interested in making found footage movies. So that is my hope with part of what I'm doing. And then I hope that other people are influenced, even if it's just by my stuff and not necessarily by other movies, to do the same thing. Conceptually, I think one thing it's not even just missing, it's not missing, I just wish there was more of it, which is
Loch
most
Ness
found footage.
Monster.
What's that?
I said Loch Ness Monster.
I mean, obviously, Werner Herzog can't do all the heavy lifting
I
for us,
know.
right?
Come on. We need another one.
But no, so what for me, most found footage movies are happy to have a camera in a place recording this stuff so that you don't have to have it be narrative. And that's the peak of we have found footage, we call it mockumentary, sometimes in reality TV, but like by and large, most of them tend to look largely the same except for some frills around the edge. My thing is like you're telling the story, but you also have what I call the meta framework of whatever this thing is. That there's just as much you can do to make your story interesting using that as there is for the narrative, excuse me, the narrative of the movie itself. Like my film was a conceit where you were seeing two batches of footage. You're seeing the stuff that I'm sending to Ravi, raw, which is who I really am, and then you're seeing clips of what ended up on the channel, which is not who I am. That was a very intentional thing that I could only do because of the framework of what I created, which is a guy who has a YouTube channel, but you get to see the stuff that doesn't make the cut, right? I leaned into the conceptual element of that. So I didn't just rely on the story. I also relied on how does the concept, the framework that I created for this, allow me to do a different kind of storytelling than you would just see in a standard movie where a guy's running around with a camera. That interests me. Like lean into whatever framework you've given it, you know? Like I think I used it in an example for a book I'm writing. You could make an entire movie from the camera on one of those disarming robots, you know, that they have to roll into
Yeah.
like what if you told a story where it was on a bomb disarming robot goes into a building because they think it's a bomb, but it turns out there's a viral outbreak on this college campus, and that's what this thing is witnessing as it's like driving. So like lean into that, right? It's not a
Get
human
weird.
character, so all kinds of crazy shit can happen in front of it because it's just a box with a camera on it. Like really lean into the concept, and you will be surprised to find that that will give you story surprises that would never have occurred to you if you were just thinking in terms of this just needs to be recorded by a camera and that's
Right.
it. That's
Yeah.
that's what's missing to me is really embrace that because that's something no other genre has is
Right.
that extra level of framework conceit, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and movies like Black Daruma just go to show you that no matter how much time we spend kind of cornering ourselves with these things, all it takes is one person with a new perspective to say, why not, like this from here, from this angle? And it is truly what keeps the genre alive. So I agree with you. And I hope that people do kind of get weird with it and go out there and start strapping cameras to God knows what. I mean, I know you had mentioned at one point the Edward Sanchez section from VHS where they strapped a camera onto the zombie. I mean, stuff like that, where it's like you could see 100 zombie movies, found footage movies, and then you see that, and that will stick with you because you're seeing something that you just didn't expect, that you just didn't see coming. So,
Yep.
totally agree.
Or
Nobody steal
like
Chris's
Isaac
idea about the bomb diffusing robot. That is trademarked to Vander Kay Industries.
copyright 2025. Um, but yeah, like or you know, there are other movies that do similar things. Like it's called Invasion or Infection. I'm not sure where you can find it, but the entire film is shot in one unbroken take through the front windshield. It's basically a dash cam of a park ranger who's going to investigate an asteroid crash, and it's like an alien invasion, but it's all done in a single take
Sold.
from just this one camera in the car. You know, like
Never
that's a
heard of this
ballsy
one.
move.
This is great.
It's not, listen, it's not the best movie in the world. There's some pretty
Right.
boring parts because it's literally a dude driving through, you know, a national park for sometimes 3 or 4 minutes just talking on a walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
But the innovation of it for me was enough to be like really appreciative of someone taking the swing. You know,
Yeah.
that's a big swing. That's a daring thing to try, you know.
100%.
And
Yeah.
that's what or Isaac Rodriguez who made Unknown Visitor, which is like a 55-minute ghost movie, but the entire thing is seen through a Ring camera on a porch, you know. That's
Hmm.
the only angle we get from the whole story, you know. I
I've
love
got
stuff
two
like
new
that
Rex
because
now. That's good. That's the problem. Every time I watch you do any interviews or anything, I'm like, oh my God, now I have 5 more movies I have to watch.
oh, this son of a bitch. Can you shut up so I can catch up, please?
A couple more fun questions and then let's wrap it up. I do appreciate all your time so far, and this has been very enjoyable. But I do want to ask you a couple more found footage nerd questions, not much more. But what would you say your favorite, or what is the greatest found footage scene in a non found footage movie?
Oh, Jesus. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's well past cliche at this point to say Sinister.
Oh, good
But
answer. No, good answer.
the the two there's a bunch of scenes in that are terrifying, but the two that always get me
Oh God, I'm
is
getting chills already thinking about the
the
freaking the tree.
okay, so that we'll start with that one. Yes, the
Yeah.
tree with the slow sawing and then
Ugh.
just watching the pendulum swing of the head and
Yeah.
is nightmarish. That's one, and
Yeah.
then the other one is the only jump scare that has worked for me as an adult, which is the camera is pointed down at a lawnmower as it is moving, and it just looks like a lawnmower moving, and then suddenly there's something in front of it, and before you can even tell what it is, it is no more.
Yeah.
Both of those moments are, I think they even did a test, like scientifically, they
Oh
said
yeah.
based on the reactions of
Sinister.
people watching it that it's the most terrifying movie ever made.
Yeah.
And I would argue it's the found footage sequences that are what scares people more than anything
Yep.
else in that movie.
100%.
So,
And I saw, I mean, anything you see from Scott Derrickson, he always tries to work in kind of little found footage flourishes, which is always awesome. I think there
mhm.
was some in Black Phone, maybe. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's cliche, way more than Sinister. It's always going to be the GOAT. I don't think I'll ever see a scene in a movie, maybe even as scary as this moment for me. It's lasted my whole life. It is the birthday party jump scare from Signs. It, like many of M. Night Shyamalan's films, he uses found footage clips to just annihilate you. And that one, I think, obviously has had a tremendous cultural impact. But that one, I mean, I just can remember the feeling in my body because you're spending an entire movie waiting to see these cinematically interesting, these creatures that you haven't even seen a glimpse of, and you're waiting and you're waiting. You're just like Joaquin Phoenix in that closet. You're literally, you've got your tinfoil hat on, you're waiting for it, you're waiting for it, and he hits you with it in broad daylight. And I mean, it's just one of the genius moments from M. Night Shyamalan's career. I mean, there are a lot of non-found footage moments in movies that are really unsuspecting that I love. I mean, Godzilla 2014 is a whole movie built out of some of its biggest moments being news footage, found footage, drove people insane. But I love seeing stuff like that in movies. I mean, I will
Yeah.
probably eventually make a video about this topic where I may or may not have a list already in my phone, but Signs is always going to be the one that I come back to where I'm just like, good God, that is
Well,
how.
you just kind of blew my mind about M. Night Shyamalan because the second that you said that and you said that he's done it in other movies, I suddenly started realizing I always thought The Visit was the only found footage he's done. But like you're right, in so many movies, we're seeing recordings of something being shown to characters within the movie, and that recording is what's impactful. In The Sixth Sense,
Yep.
when they find the VHS tape of the little
Huge.
girl,
Yeah.
like, yeah, God, that's fantastic.
There's
I'm
some
so glad you
moments
pointed that out.
in Unbreakable. I mean, in Unbreakable, you're not shown a train crash until you see him watching it on the news. Um,
Or God, the security footage of the man breaking into the people's home.
yep.
Jesus. Yeah.
Terrifying.
Wow.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's
That's
really like,
that single moment in the movie has scared my wife more than any other horror film we've ever
yeah.
watched because it's so nightmarishly realistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's he's always been one of my favorite directors as a Philadelphia native. I've made a lot of videos about him, and he continues to do what I've been kind of, we've been talking about this whole time is just innovate, reform, come up with a new idea. Do they all work? Hell no. But the dude is out there making it happen, and you can tell. I mean, I wish he would make another found footage movie because I feel like The Visit was like a little more comedic than kind of what I get involved in when it comes to his work. But yeah, I mean, he's had some incredible found footage moments that have just scared the bejesus out of me. I'm sure there's plenty in The Happening too, if I wanted to go and torture myself by rewatching that movie.
No, man, I'm really glad that you said that though, because there will probably, I don't know that I'm ever going to do an episode about found footage narrative hybrids, but if I do have that conversation, he's definitely going to be part of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one last question. What would you
Right.
say the most impactful found footage moments you have had in a movie theater before?
Well, so here's the I will be honest, I'm trying to remember, aside from Paranormal Activity, any found footage films that I've seen in theaters.
Right.
Almost every single one I've ever seen has been home theater, just
That's
because so
interesting.
few of them have been.
Yeah, I mean,
What's that?
I always went because it's just who I am, and just I've always been obsessed with the theater experience, and I also loved found footage. Since the Blair Witch Project on, I saw every single Paranormal Activity in theaters, and those had such an amazing experience seeing that with a crowd of people. For me, it's always going to be Cloverfield, just because of
Mhm.
the way that the marketing was done. Cloverfield was a
Oh, that was
movie
genius.
that
Yeah.
you just had no idea what you were getting yourself into. And I remember sitting there and being like, this is like the future of genre filmmaking. Like, surely this will be how everyone is making movies for the rest of time. Um, may not have panned out that way, but I mean that movie had a huge buzz to it that was really unlike a lot of found footage movies anymore. I mean, it's even over Paranormal Activity and stuff like that. Cloverfield just rocked me. I mean, I really don't think that if I had seen it out of context and didn't have that experience, I would have such a connection to it. But that was kind of like what it's all about for me, is just like the mystery of found footage, the potential of found footage when you start a found footage movie and you haven't seen a trailer, which honestly, most horror movies, I'm going to watch a trailer. It doesn't matter if they're in theaters, doesn't found footage is totally the opposite. I like prefer to not even see a trailer because A, you're going to get most of the meat that you don't want spoiled, but also it's not necessary. I mean, all these movies are mid-budgeted or small budgeted. They're all just kind of like independent efforts. And it's just fun to kind of try them out, try anything that comes onto your way, and you don't need to have that preparation. And Cloverfield mixed both Hollywood filmmaking, blockbuster filmmaking, and also not knowing what you're getting into and being in somebody else's point of view as it happens. So it'd be weird to ever see kind of that the perfect storm that was created around that movie being replicated. But that movie, and obviously Blair Witch, which I saw in theaters and completely changed my life, honestly, were probably the two that stuck with me the most. But Paranormal Activity, that was a party. Every Paranormal Activity movie was a party.
I will say though, the sequence in a film, in any found footage film that has had the most impact on me in any film ever was, I'm sure you've seen it. It's a fairly low budget film that feels like an extended episode of 48 Hours, like a true crime investigation. It's called Savage Land, and it has, for my money, the best use of found media that has ever been in a found footage film. The sequence where they find the single roll of black and white film, and we see the entire progression of a night's horrifying events through, what is it, 27 photographs, I
Yeah,
think, right?
still photos. Incredible.
Yeah. It is mind blowing to me that a movie that has the ability to show us moving images created a 16-minute sequence with those 27 photographs that was so powerful
Yeah.
because of the fact that you didn't know what happened before or after that still image. It was all about the insinuation of what the moment before and the moment after was.
Yeah.
And like that to me captured what found footage can do better than anything else that I've seen, because it was about the magic of you being involved in the narrative now. I'm not just being told a story. I'm being given part of an event, and I have to do the math in my head and with what the narration is telling me to put all these three pieces together. Their narration, these images in my brain create something that did not exist with any of those pieces individually. And
Right.
it would genuinely, it sounds like hyperbole when I say it was life changing, but when I watched that movie, I was like, there's someone out there who is better at doing the thing that I'm trying to do than I am, and I now have something to aim towards. I
Yeah.
now have a person to look at as the guy who, on a very small scale, I guess it was actually three guys, they did it. They did the thing that I'm going to try to do for the rest of my life. The
Yeah.
same way that people will become obsessed with Stanley Kubrick or whatever. That's the movie that I look at as like,
Hmm.
you did the thing. Thank
Yeah.
you for doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I almost don't want to know how they achieved those photos. I'd almost rather not know any background to them because they are so haunting that I don't want to ruin the mystique around it. I mean, for me, that movie absolutely rocked me to my core. And there's so little else to the movie in terms of structure, narrative. It's really like, let's make a movie hinged on 27 photographs. And that is just like
Yeah.
genius. So
Well, and it
that's a
totally
great
fools
choice.
you too, because the first 45 minutes of the movie feels like a sort of like overbaked episode of whatever that shit that, grandmas watch on Friday nights on CBS,
Yeah.
that guy starts, he goes, they went on vacation to Jamaica. Little did they suspect, like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Like, so that's where you think it's going, and then it suddenly just becomes so much deeper and darker, and then those pictures show up, and it's just like all bets are off. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's genius.
Great choice. And final lightning round question, Chris Vander Kay, if you could greenlight one found footage movie from a franchise that has never done found footage, what would you greenlight?
Oh man. Wow. Holy shit. Does it have to be horror or it could be
Yeah,
anything?
anything, anything. I mean, we know that there is anything in the found footage genre. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I was originally going to say I'd love to see a Star Wars found footage movie, but I technically that's what Troops is, the short fan film
yeah,
that's basically like an episode of Cops, so I can't use Star Wars. So honestly, probably it would be, you know what? I would probably go with one of the classic slashers. I think a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or a Friday the 13th done in found footage would be fantastic, mostly because the way I would do it, if I were greenlighting it, I would also probably have creative influence, would be more like a series of sightings of something than a single group of people, right? Like for me, it would be, was it the second or the third Friday the 13th where there was the guy who was basically the Jason hunter because his sister had been killed and he was
Yeah,
going into the woods to try and find this guy? What if you took that idea and the idea was now he's not trying to find him, he's trying to convince people that this urban legend of Jason exists. So he's
yeah.
gathered all of this crazy fucking footage of people getting murdered in the woods and all that, and now he's going out to try and find all the places where these things happen so he can prove to the cops. So like that's probably how I would frame it, something like that.
That's a great answer. I mean, I obviously from being poisoned in my brain by watching YouTube all day long, I would say like a Godzilla movie would be obviously incredible, even though that's getting a little too close to Cloverfield. There is, I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head. Bunker 51. I can't remember what the name is. Something to that effect. It's a Godzilla found footage movie, like made in Blender, basically on YouTube,
Hmm.
and I would watch that short. I think it's called Shelter 54.
Hmm.
And if you haven't seen it, it literally, to me, blows the entire MonsterVerse out of the water because it introduces such fear and scale into it. It's kind of what Gareth Edwards was trying to do with Godzilla 14, but like done better and during the daytime and a little better thought out in certain ways. Shelter 54 is an incredible experience. I would love to see something like that. And as a pure nerd, if we're doing Alien Earth, if we're shipping the Alien franchise all over the world because it's Disney, make a movie like the Atticus Institute, but like on a Wayland Yutani base where they are like
Yeah.
playing with the black goo, experimenting with xenomorphs, and you're watching all in lab footage of their experiments. Because anytime you see an alien property, it's always like they did experiments elsewhere. Like Romulus was like, they did the experiments last week and now they're all dead. It's like, show me all of that. I want to see people
Yeah.
screwing around with this stuff. Like, I'm
Yep.
tired of seeing 8 people run away in a dark ship. Like, show me something from the scientist point of view where they're really trying to crack into the science and the methodology of the black goo. I mean, that's as somebody wearing a Prometheus shirt, probably pretty obvious thing to say at this point. But yeah, if I had the power, why not? Let's get an alien movie, or God, even a Predator movie, especially with the wood setting. A Predator movie would be a hell of a lot of fun and found footage. But
Yeah. Well,
hey,
that would be, I mean, that's a no-brainer. You know what I mean? Like, it's obviously going to be a show that starts as a hunting show, right? Like, dudes in the woods trying to make a whatever the hell. And
it's amazing that when you think about it, the plot of Predator is like the prototypical uh, archetype for a ton of found footage movies. Just people on a mission doing A, getting countered by creature B, and it rips everything apart down to the last man. That is kind of the plot of 80% of found footage movies. So
yeah,
I don't
really,
know.
the only place it changes is that a dude actually got out of there alive. That was
Yeah,
it.
right. Chris, thank you so much, man. Again, wish you the best of luck with the Found TV series, with your next film that you're working on, with the premiere. Again, if you end up doing an event in Philly, let me know. I will go stump for you all day, put a big sign together that says, ask me anything. And I really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for having this conversation, man. It's an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you at this level.
Well, it was an honor to come, and I hope I said this to you when we were not recording, so that you know that it's true. But I'm going to say it to you now, which is you've been spreading the gospel of found footage since before me. So while I appreciate that you like what I was doing, the reason that I even have an audience is because of guys like you who are out there ringing the bell for this shit before anybody knew what it was, before it was popular. You were making, you know what I mean? You were making videos when it was clear that that wasn't going to be the thing that spiked your numbers. You were doing it because you liked them and you wanted other people to know about them. And that's the only way that anybody's stuff ever gets seen in this arena, you know? So you have, you're thanking me for making the work. I'm thanking you for making people pay attention to the work to begin
Sure.
with. So
Thanks, dude. I really appreciate that. And again, best of luck coming up. You got a lot of amazing things coming and can't wait to watch your progress. And guess we'll talk again before Ask 2.
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it, man.
Bye.
Because I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and I've seen all your movies, and I love your movies, and I think you're the best.